Here we are. Hello, everyone. Come on in. We are here for our session number 10, I think. We're nearly there, aren't we?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, we're on day 2, session number 10. And we have the amazing Sarah from SEK Handmade. If I said that right, do you say SEK Handmade?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. I've read it in my head many times, but never known how. And Sarah has just, I hope you saw her video there. It was the most amazing presentation about hats, everything to do with hats and how to actually make a hat that fits. Because, oh my gosh, I am definitely had a crochet journey that has involved making hats that do not fit. And there are so many really quick, easy, actionable things that you can do to ensure that they do fit. So Sarah has gone through all of them absolutely beautifully. And this is what I want to say. Sleepy Bear is saying, what a great personality you have. Absolutely. I think that there's such a key to learning stuff is so much easier when it's presented in such an easy and accessible way. So thank you so much, Sarah, for doing that. Oh, look at this, Sandy. You're a ray of sunshine. Keep them coming, people. Keep them coming.
Yes, keep them coming.
Julia's here as well. But of course, we are also here to answer any questions that you have. Anything to do with hats, constructions, fitting, sizing, anything like that, because Sarah is your person for this. And Veronika and I will just tag along at the sides.
Yes.
Lots of hellos coming through. Awesome. But yeah, Sarah, is hats just your thing? Or is it just that you know lots of things and you just know a lot about hats as well?
I am a teacher by trade. I actually went to college to learn to teach, and I taught in elementary school for many years. And then, excuse me, when we moved to where we are now, almost immediately the pandemic happened.
Oh gosh.
But after things opened back up, my local yarn shop owner reached out to me and said, I have a knitting teacher who's trying to teach crochet, but I really need a just crochet teacher. And I was like, me. And a lot of people started coming into the shop with hats that did not fit. So it's not really my specialty per se. Teaching is my specialty. But as I started to think about it, I was like, this makes sense. A hat seems like a great first project, a great beginner project. There are lots of great beginner hats out there, but there are a lot of things that you don't know as a beginner until you mess them up. But who wants to make all of the mistakes first when someone else can just say, here's what you need to know, and then you can be successful.
Yeah, and I think lots of people say, don't they? Oh, hats, they're quick and easy. It doesn't really matter if they don't fit, etc., etc. It's like just because something's quick doesn't mean that it's okay to not know where you're going when you're starting. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yes,
we've got questions coming in saying really enjoyed the video. I also have a child-sized head and all hat patterns fall down over my nose. I have the opposite problem. I have a big head, unfortunately. Do you recommend top down or bottom up for a small circumference head, and where can I adjust?
So I have to confess, my favorite types of hats are bottom up. One of the reasons so in all of my patterns, or most of my patterns, I have a chart that says how much each piece of the hat is. So the brim is this deep, the hat is this much, the decreases are this much, because I think that's really helpful to know. If I know that the standard size of a hat, or the hat in the pattern says it's going to be 9 inches tall, I know personally that my little head needs 8 inches, and I know that the brim is 2 inches and the decreases are 2 inches, then I know the two easiest places, I guess, to make adjustments are in the brim depth, because you can easily stretch that or shrink it. But it is hard to make adjustments in the decreases. That's not where you want to be mucking around with a hat if you can avoid it. So knowing how much I should expect to have in the body of the hat, which is just, the straight repeats, or, you're not messing around with decreases or anything, part of the hat, I'd say that's the best place. And a lot of times when I look at a hat to adjust it, I look at that center part and I say, what am I going to take off the bottom? Or what am I going to take off the top of that? So if it's just a straight repeat of the same thing over and over again, then you can just say, oh, I'm going to remove 2 rows because that gives me, you know, an inch shorter, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Another good thing then is to look at the gauge, because you need to know if I need my hat to be an inch shorter, you need to look at the gauge and say, okay, so what's 1 inch? How many rows is that? Because in a fingering weight hat, that might be 5 or 6 rows.
Mhm.
And in a bulky weight hat, that might just be 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, but that's really, really helpful, that you give this measurements of the different parts. I never really thought of it that way, for people to be able to adjust like what different parts of the hat measure.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, it's probably easiest just to take out some rounds or rows from just a straightforward section, isn't it? Where you don't mess around with increases, decreases. So yeah, that's a really helpful tip there.
Definitely. And Bonnie's saying this all struck home for me. I think it will have struck home for lots of people.
Yeah.
When I was trying to make a hat for my little great niece who was 400 miles away, I was sure it wasn't big enough. I was sure it wasn't big enough because of the shape. Fortunate for her, it fit for 2 years.
Awesome.
Oh. The thing is, like, hats are very forgiving, aren't they? And you know what? They are a really good place to learn, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it really, like, the world is not going to come to an end if you make a hat and it is not the right size. Honestly, it doesn't matter. But if you can work your way to getting it to the right size, then what an amazing thing. Like, the whole thing is the learning process, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
And kids are so hard because kids have such different head
Yeah.
sizes. And the thing that I learned, I started, I think a lot of makers' journey is that we start crafting for ourselves. We get more stuff than we could ever possibly wear ourselves. And so we start selling, right?
Yeah.
And that was my journey too. And when I went to start selling, one of the things I learned is that the biggest difference in size when you're talking kids, so like maybe 5 and up versus adults, is the depth, not the circumference.
Yeah.
I can take a kid's hat and put it on my head, and the only difference is that it won't go quite deep enough on me.
Yeah.
So it can be really hard. And babies especially, man, they are so many different sizes.
So I used to be a midwife, Sarah, for many years, and we used to have so many hats donated, which is absolutely wonderful. Knitted hats, crocheted hats, etc. And the amount of different sizes and shapes that came, and you could absolutely guarantee that you could not find a hat the right size for the baby that you just delivered. Never ever. You could never find that the right size, even though you'd have a massive bag full of hats. Yeah. So we used to make them actually out of like tubi grip. So out of
okay.
You see how you do that, and then so you cut a long strip, and then and I kind of want to design a crochet one like that, because I think it would be really cool if you got the stretch right on it.
Yeah.
And you put your hand in and you twist it and you turn it in on itself, and it just literally is a hat. So there's no seaming or anything. I need to add that to my list of things to remember.
Drawing inspiration from this summit as well. I think we've got Julie doing a video on mending socks now. So it's all going ahead.
Oh, Bethany says, so glad to see you on this summit. Your gauge series on your channel is awesome. Anyone who hasn't seen it, make sure you go and check it out. You've just been on Sarah's channel, so make sure you go there and subscribe and watch all of that.
Absolutely. And it comes in especially handy for the hats as well. The gauge, definitely something that if you want a perfect fitting hat, is not something to skip. So do definitely go and watch that.
Definitely. Joanne saying thank you so much. I absolutely love your giggles. And then Sleepy Bear saying you talked about measuring first, then modify if needed. I get stuck in other patterns because I tend to crochet to measurements instead of size. Is there a class for modifying any pattern?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I don't have a class on modifying patterns. I think so. I like to follow along with this knitter, and she's a very popular knitter. So if you knit, you know her. Her name is Andrea Mowry, and she used to be a baker. And she says, when I would bake cookies, I would bake them, and if they came out of the oven and they were awful, you had to throw them away. Like, there's no unbaking your cookie.
Yes.
That's what's amazing about yarn, is you can always pull it back. So I think the best way to learn about modifications is to just say, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to see what happens. And you start to learn, you know, that you have a child size head and that all your hats need to be a little shorter. And here's where I like to do it. Or if you have a taller head or a bigger head, you know, here's how I modify to make it fit me really well.
Yeah. I think it was really interesting what you said about as well, measuring where you like to wear your hats. I'd never really clocked onto that as well. I mean, because I like to wear mine quite low as well, but then tipped up at the front. So it swings to the back. But lots of people don't. And I've had people make my hat designs and they're like, oh, they're really tall. And I'm like, yeah, because I want it tipped and you know, that's how I like to wear them. But there's you know, you have to look at how the designer has styled it and designed it, and then make your version of it. If you want something different, maybe that's not the hat pattern for you. Or if you really want that hat pattern, you'll need to figure out how to modify that.
That's definitely not something I ever thought of to say to people, this is how I wear the hat. Like, to me,
it's funny,
it's naturally, I need my ears covered because my ears are going to fall off and I need my ears covered. But that's definitely a good point, that if then people want to wear it, you know, above their ears, it's definitely going to be creating a bit of a teepee at the top, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that that's something to, I think a lot of times we get caught up in the look of something. I mean, we see a designer's beautiful face and style, and we look and think, I want that whole thing, instead of really analyzing the pictures and saying, well, how tall is that hat? How is it being worn? I'm a person who really likes a hat that is fitted at the top so that there are decreases, that it's not just a tube that gets cinched up, which there's absolutely a place for that. And people love those. But my personal preference is that it's fitted at the top. And so one of the things I always look for is there a flat lay that I can see? Is it just cinched, or does it actually have shaping at the top? And a great place to look for that stuff, if a designer has a lot of really beautiful looking pictures, but not something that shows it at quite the right angle for you, is go on Ravelry and look at the projects.
Yes, that's great.
Because that person's going to throw it down on a table like you would. They are not usually like curating the perfect picture. You know, they're showing it more in real life than a curated picture. So projects are priceless.
Can we take a moment though, as three people who have modeled many a hat, how difficult is it to take a picture of yourself wearing the hat to show off just the hat? And I've got quite a pointy big nose, and every time I look down, I'm like, oh, my nose. And I know people are not looking at my nose, they're looking at the hat. But you know, when you're like, I don't want that picture on the internet.
Like, not 5 chins, not 5 chins.
I've got hat pictures. They're so like, for the hat, to get a flattering picture of the hat, it is not a flattering picture of me.
I love modeling hats because it covers my greys.
You haven't got any.
I do also want to say that when I teach a class on a pattern, part of learning from me in person is helping each person modify the pattern individually. So if you are newer and you don't know what you don't know because you don't have years of experience and you've never designed anything before, a great thing to do is to go to a professional, whether that's find at your local yarn shop the teacher, and you could sit down with them for, you know, a little bit with the pattern, and they could say, take these 3 rows out or add 5 stitches because then the decreases will still work. And if you don't have that resource within your local community of a crochet teacher specifically, the little old ladies, they want to share with you what they know.
Oh, they do.
And so going to social events and yarn circles, and even if you sit down and you're like, oh my gosh, everybody here knits, asking if they crochet at my yarn shop. We have lots of people who come, and half the time you'll look around and I might be the only one crocheting. But because I know those people, I can tell you that about half of them also crochet and could answer your crochet questions, even though they're knitting currently.
Yeah,
definitely.
And sometimes the process might be very similar to knitting as
Sure.
well, isn't it? You know, it's
Absolutely.
working out the gauge and how many rounds you need to take out. So yeah, the process will be very similar.
Yeah,
So
and my mum's actually part of a crochet group, and she does crochet and crochets brilliantly, but she's predominantly a knitter, and so it's almost like she speaks knitting language but translates it into crochet. So she thinks in knits and then works it out into crochet. So if anyone has a problem, she's I think one of the more experienced ones there. They'll ask her, and she'll be like, "Well, if I was knitting, I'd do this. So therefore, let's figure out." So it's not a bad thing to even ask a knitter as well. Someone that's very experienced would absolutely be able to help you with this.
And to be honest, I'm not a knitter, and that's how I knitted my very first beanie for when Cole was born. I just kind of started with the brim and worked up the height, and then I thought, well, in crochet, I like crochet 6 and then decrease, and crochet 6 and decrease. So I was like, I'll knit 6 and decrease, and I'll knit, and that's how I kind of shaped the top of the crown without following a pattern. And I'm not a knitter; I can't even.
The opposite of my mum, then. In crochet.
So the process is pretty much the same. So definitely ask even a knitter.
So next question, for a person with a large head, how do you increase it? I increase the chain and it's too small.
Oh, okay. So, one, I think that people chain too tight a lot of times. That like a hat will fit, but it's that first chain that's just too tight to get on. And if you don't want to put your hat on and be like, oh, it feels okay, and then take it off and have like a mark across your forehead where it's been like pressing in on you. So my first tip would be go up a hook size or 2. I have friends who are prolific and fantastic crocheters, and that's not a beginner tip. They still always go up a hook size or 2 when they chain, because they just know they chain tight. And it's so much better to adjust your tools than to say, oh, I'm just going to crochet a loose chain. Like that's hard to do consistently.
Yeah, consistently. That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. You might do it for a couple, but not,
But if you're going to add stitches to the circumference of a hat, the tricky part there is if it's a fitted hat, you've mucked with the decreases. So what I would do is, and this is a little more advanced, but what I would do is I would look at the pattern and I would look at the first decrease. So if you're doing, like Veronika said, and the first decrease is do 6 stitches, work 2 together, that's 8 stitches. And so I would then try to increase by a number of 8. So if it's having you decrease evenly around in 8 stitches, if it says do that 10 times and you add 8 more stitches, then you're going to do it 11 times.
Yeah.
So it's important, if you just throw in 2 more stitches because that's what you need, then you're going to have to figure it out. Of course, taking a round of decrease to get back to the right numbers is totally something you can do. My recommendation then is just make sure you spread them out around the hat. Don't just do it in one spot. Like if you're going to do 3 or 4 of them, do them, on each
different
corner of the hat instead of like, I'm going to take 4 out of here. Yeah, it will make it like lean tight.
It's cinched in at one side. It could be a design feature. You never know.
Actually, why not?
Next question from Debbie. Is that a granny stitch scarf you are wearing? And the colour is beautiful, they've said. Yes. It looks like a granny stitch, is it?
It is not a granny stitch.
It's not at all, is it? That's lovely.
Beautiful.
That's very lovely. Is that a pattern?
It is a pattern.
Yeah?
Yes.
Where to find it?
So it's on Ravelry, and it's definitely on Ravelry. And this is one of my vacation shawls. And so my vacation shawls are designed for that one skein of yarn you fell in love with on vacation and brought home. And now you're like, what do I do with one skein of yarn?
Yep. We've been talking about
they're
that.
then simple enough that you can take them on your next vacation, and they are relaxing to work instead of stressful.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. So someone's saying I make a practice one and donate to charity, and then I have an idea of where I need to make changes Thanks for the tips to get it right first time.
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
And lots of people do make, like, consistently make for charity, don't they? And hats are a really good thing to make in child to adult sizes. Definitely,
absolutely.
Definitely.
That way, it's definitely going to fit some head, isn't it?
Yeah.
Donate it.
Except the baby that I needed it to fit, of course.
Exactly. Also, then I'd say make sure you make a Ravelry project or have a journal somewhere that you write that down, because while you might remember to make the next immediate hat, if you lose the hat, or your dog eats the hat, or somebody throws it in a washing machine when it wasn't supposed to be, and you're like, that was my favorite hat, you might have to do that process all over again to refigure it out when you've already done the work. So make sure you have some sort of journal that you keep it in to remind yourself the adjustments you've made.
I think that's definitely an advice that I can take myself as well, because sometimes when I'm designing, so I was like, I remember that, yeah, I just did this, and then you kind of literally spend an hour like looking at this project thinking, what did I do here? What?
Yeah.
Really?
And I have since having my children, I used to be so organized with how I would note take while I was making something and designing something. And then I just am not quite as organized anymore. And notebooks are in different places and stuff. And so, I end up patching together things from various random diagrams and things. I'm like,
Yep. Kids definitely pull us in a lot of different directions.
They certainly do. And then they draw something on the thing, and I'm like, I now can't see what I'm doing. And I made it pretty, mummy. Thank you. Carrie's saying, I'm curious, how does horizontal stretch in Tunisian crochet compare to crochet and knit?
I think it always depends on the stitch, right?
Yeah.
Hannah talked earlier about making the super stretchy tube that's great to, fit a lot of hats or a lot of heads. And I think it's the same with, like, to do that, you would need to find a really nice stretchy crochet stitch. There are absolutely stretchy crochet stitches, but it's a matter of knowing how much stretch you have. So I think Tunisian crochet, same thing. There are some stitches that have really nice stretch. The thing that I don't want you to get caught in is that there are quite a few Tunisian crochet stitches that look like knitting. They're not formed in the same way. And so they definitely don't have the same amount of stretch. Probably the best way to check that is just to do a swatch and then give it a pull and see, like, am I like, or does it give me nice big stretch?
Yeah, definitely. And there's that magic thing as well of the yarn and the hook size and the everything, isn't there? What fiber are you using? All that kind of stuff. It's a big melting pot. But I think, I don't know, you've done many more Tunisian projects than I have, Veronika. Like, it doesn't. Yeah. Sometimes it has that stretch. Sometimes it doesn't, does it?
So I would be very, very careful with the horizontal stretch, because the thing with that is when you work the return pass, your return pass is basically a chain of stitches. Yes. So just imagine how stretchy your foundation chain is. Imagine that throughout your project all the way up your fabric. So the horizontal stretch in Tunisian is very limited. Like Sarah said, some stitches will give you more stretch, but essentially that chain back, the return pass, you're basically chaining through the loops, working the stitches off. So the horizontal stretch, I would say, don't rely on it. Just take the fabric as it is. Oh, but the vertical stretch, what I found with my sweater is that the vertical stretch, even the Tunisian knit stitch, which is quite a dense stitch, it does stretch, but the feel of the fabric, it's not knit. It looks knit, but it's not knit at all, because you've got the return pass kind of at the back of the work. It almost feels like you've got like a double layer of fabric, because you push all the return pass to the back. 100%. So you got the chains at the back and the front. So yes, Tunisian crochet is beautiful, and it can be, like Hannah said, the combination of the yarn and the hook. Like 100%. I made a whole sweater in knit stitch in 4-ply yarn with a 7mm hook.
Wow.
and it's the most amazing sweater I've made in Tunisian, and I love it, and it's so drapey and beautiful, but it was down to the combination of the yarn and the hook, not so much the stitch, the Tunisian crochet. So yeah, horizontal stretch, I would say. If I had to line up the three, I would go knit, then standard crochet, and then your Tunisian crochet has like the least horizontal stretch in my opinion. Yeah.
So if it has with the vertical stretch then, and this is another question for you, Sarah, about would then a side across in any kind of what you're talking about in stretch, would a side across construction be better if you wanted to harness that stretch?
Yeah, you definitely could. I find, because of my love of shaped hats at the top, I find what would that be? A horizontal? No, a vertically worked hat, right?
Yeah.
Up and down.
Yeah.
I find that to be one of the more challenging constructions. I did a hat that was horizontal, and I had to make peaks at the top of it so that you could then sew them closed to close in the top of the hat. And that was a challenge.
Yeah.
If you love scrunched all, if you're going to make a tube and scrunch it all up at the top and put a pom-pom on it, you can do that in any stitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
I love it. I love how it's making people think outside the box and outside what they normally do. It's awesome. Absolutely awesome.
And I will say, as far as chain or as far as yarn goes, there's a lot that goes into making each yarn different. So fiber content, mixes of fibers make a big difference. I am not a 100% cotton person, but I have felt some cotton wool blends, and I'm like,
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. But then also even I really want to be a yarn spinner, so I've learned a lot about it, but actually haven't done any. But even how the yarn is spun can make a difference in the stretch and how durable it is and all of that stuff. So it does have a lot to do with the yarn.
Definitely.
Amazing.
Debbie's asking, can you use foundation chain?
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering as well whether you're meaning foundation stitches as well.
Yeah, that's what I assume. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's another great way to avoid a super tight first row. I do find a foundation chain to be very stretchy, and that might be my personal, like, how I work it. So sometimes I find the opposite problem where I need to go down a hook size to make it more uniform with my stitches.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that before. When I first did the foundation single crochet, I used to go through just the one loop when I was making the next stitch. And my foundation, I was like,
bigger and bigger.
Where is this going? And then I thought, no, actually, I watched someone's video and I'm like, oh, you go on both of those loops of that chain stitch on the side. And since I've started doing that, it's staying within the dimensions. It's not like outgrowing the place.
Again, it's another one of those things and we've said this every single year. You only know what you know when you find it out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And unless you find it out, and don't ever say, oh gosh, I should have known that. You should not have known that. It doesn't matter that you didn't know that up until this point. You know it now. You know it now. So go forward with it and do with it what you will.
Yeah.
Definitely. Kristen saying it helps with the chain to make sure you are really using the shaft of the yarn with each chain motion instead of just flipping the hook tip. Hope that makes sense. Yes, that definitely makes sense.
100%.
Yeah.
That is one of the first things I teach my Learn to Crochet people is that when you are stressed out or frustrated, even if you are an experienced crocheter, your first instinct is to tense down and you're just working against yourself, because especially in things like the chain where it's just loops connected together, when you start pulling on your tensioning yarn, you're tightening it around your hook. So my first recommendation is, so what she's talking about, I just haven't had my crochet hook here, is always pulling your yarn down to where it tapers. And so a lot of new crocheters or people when they're stressed out will keep their yarn down here. Well, the measurement of my hook is down here where it's straight. So if you're feeling like you're tense, you need to make sure that every time you put your yarn on your hook, instead of keeping it up here, that you're sliding back down.
Yeah.
And it can help then to put a finger on that loop so that even if you pull on it, I'm not shrinking it because my finger is there holding the loop in place.
Definitely. And we talked about it earlier, didn't we, Veronica, about ergonomic hooks, actually. Another thing to be careful of is that if they're a shape, you know, an all-in-one, you haven't got a handle to it, just be careful you don't go too far down, because then it will stretch it out further than it needs to be.
Yeah,
So,
like
like that. Yeah.
It just you can't quite tell, but it kind of gets a bit too wider there. And just by looking at it, you wouldn't probably think, oh, that's much thicker than the first part. But yeah, so it could do it could be to do a lot with the type of hook you're using as well. So that's another thing to take into account as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love how all of our sessions are all like suddenly all you know, meshing together and we talked about this and this, and it shows how applicable, even though we're talking about completely different topics, they are all interlinking, they're all making sense together. So hopefully it's making sense for everyone as well. Tips Jake says, one thing I have found helpful is that I use sock yarn when making newborn or infant hats for new mums. It allows quite a bit of stretch and fits the littlest and biggest. Yeah, because you never quite know how big their heads are going to be, do you?
No.
Yep. As someone who had a baby both early and late.
Oh.
Their heads come in very different sizes when that happens. And they come whenever they want.
They do indeed. They do indeed. And Jan saying this is another idea for you, making a rectangle and then sewing it together and making cat ears in the corners is so cute. And that's the thing as well, you know, you don't have to, you know, there's loads of cool stuff, especially in kids ones, you know, ones with dinosaur spikes on the top of them and all that kind of stuff. You know, you don't have to take it all too seriously, and especially for kids hats, you know, like just have fun, and as long as they like them. My children love crazy wonderful things, so you know.
I have found also, if to make a rectangle hat and not do shaping, a kids version that I really loved was you make the rectangle, you just seam it across the top, and then you put either pom-poms or tassels on the tips of it, and then it's like
they love it, don't they?
Fun. Yeah, that you can wobble your head and it's like movement.
I've done little twirly things, like literally single crochets, but really tight ones that turn into little twirls, and they're like, yay!
So fun. It's like they have little pigtails.
Yeah,
awesome.
And then you don't need to worry about it. You literally just make it to the height that you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, this is interesting. Sandy said, I watched a tutorial for a summer bucket hat the other day, and the instructor said there were differences in the cotton yarn, that she definitely wouldn't use dishcloth cotton. Yeah, I mean, there's cotton and there's cotton, isn't there? Yeah. There's like heavy, thick worsted cotton, and then you've got Pima cotton, and like you say, you've got blends as well. I would definitely head towards blends. But if you're making a summer hat, then yes, it does make sense to have it in a more durable and breathable cotton as well, doesn't it? But as we said with the shawls, cotton can also end up being quite hot as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. One thing I like to say is that you need to remember that the wool was designed for sheep, right? And you can't have sheep overheating and passing out in the summer.
Yeah.
So wool is not just designed to keep warm. It's also very wicking. And as long as you're not doing something big and heavy, wool can absolutely be a summer fiber. So a cotton wool blend in a summer hat might be really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely.
It depends how much structure you want in your summer bucket hat as well, isn't it? Yeah.
But a lot goes into that too. If it's really tight stitches, even a yarn that's a little more loose can get some good structure to it.
Hold its shape. Yeah.
It's all this big magic melting pot, isn't it, that creates a final product. There's so many variables. That's the thing, isn't it? And I think that's what lots of people find so frustrating, isn't it? Because it's not just about following a pattern, is it? It's about understanding what you're doing when you're following that pattern.
Yes,
definitely. Yep. Sarah, we've run out of
time. I know.
I literally just looked. I was like, it was like 22 a minute ago.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
Absolutely.
Oh, Sarah, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Everyone has really, really enjoyed your presentation. So do go and find. Sarah has loads of beautiful hat patterns and lots of resources to help you with that. As you see, she's an amazing teacher. So do go and find all of her stuff. And we have our next presentation is Michelle, who you have just spent a lovely few days with, haven't you? We were just chatting about. You've seen Michelle in person. Michelle of Tale of Knots is going to talk amazingly about bust and hip shaping for garments. It's just hold on to your hats or garments.
Mind-blowing.
It's absolutely awesome. So if everyone wants to pop over to Michelle's YouTube channel, it's premiering just as we speak now, and then we'll be back here afterwards for a live Q&A with Michelle. So yeah,